Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are sailing straight into the center of a rapidly escalating geopolitical drama.
And it's all unfolding in the high-stakes, high-pressure shipping lanes of the Caribbean Sea. This is where economic pressure meets kinetic military action.
That's right. We have consolidated sources detailing what really amounts to a serious maritime pursuit, and it's underway right now.
Exactly. It's the latest incident in a rapid series of, frankly, aggressive U.S. enforcement actions against oil tankers that are explicitly linked to Venezuela.
And this transforms what are normally just busy commercial shipping lanes into a new, incredibly tense front in a deeply rooted economic and political conflict.
The stakes here are just immense. It's testing the very boundaries of international law and, maritime sovereignty.
Absolutely. So our mission for you, the listener, is crystal clear. We need to distill the raw facts of this confrontation.
Understand the core legal and political arguments from both Washington and Caracas.
And, critically, assess the profound potential for regional instability. You should walk away with a clear, comprehensive view of how sanctions are now being enforced.
Not just through banks anymore.
No, not just through banks, but with actual naval assets on the high seas.
It's the definition of a pressure test. Let's jump right into the immediate news, the incident that triggered this new spike in tension.
Okay, let's start with the current operational picture. The sources are reporting that U.S. forces, we're talking Coast Guard and military elements, are engaged in an active pursuit.
Of a third oil tanker linked to Venezuela.
A third one. This is the breaking update that just underscores how immediate and high risk this whole situation has become.
It really does. And it's crucial to note that while this pursuit is active, this specific ship has not yet been intercepted or seized. The chase is very much on.
So it's happening in real time.
In real time.
Yeah.
And the U.S. isn't simply stopping these vessels. These actions are consistently framed by officials as a judicial seizure.
That phrase seems important. Judicial seizure.
It is. It suggests they believe they have specific legal grounds that justify using force in what are, international waters.
Okay, so that distinction is key. What is the specific legal rationale that U.S. forces are citing to justify, a military intervention against a civilian commercial vessel?
The primary rationale they've provided hinges on a core piece of maritime legal maneuvering. They claim the ship is flying a fake flag.
A fake flag.
Yeah.
It's a very strong term. For listeners who aren't steeped in admiralty law, what does that actually mean in practice?
Right. It's not necessarily about a physically counterfeit flag.
Okay.
It's about exploiting the complexities of international shipping law. Many vessels register under what are called flags of convenience, countries like Panama or Liberia that offer favorable taxes or less stringent regulation.
So a fake flag claim means what exactly?
It essentially means U.S. officials are alleging the vessel is registered under one of these flags fraudulently. Maybe they're changing registration quickly or using a shell company, all to specifically evade U.S. sanctions against the Venezuelan regime.
I see. So by arguing the flag is fraudulent.
By arguing it's fraudulent, the U.S. seeks to strip the vessel of the legal protection that its flag state would normally provide.
And that allows the U.S. to claim it's subject to seizure under U.S. federal law.
Precisely, because they can then argue it's being used as a tool for criminal activity, in this case, sanctions evasion.
So it's a legal loophole, really. A way to create jurisdiction for an economic enforcement action. Do we know the identity of the ship they're pursuing right now?
We do. While officials have been, tight-lipped for operational security, media sources suggest the target is the Bella 1.
The Bella 1.
And what adds weight to this is that the Bella 1 is already a known quantity. It was reportedly sanctioned before for transporting Iranian oil.
Ah, so there's a history there.
A clear track record. It suggests the U.S. is focusing on vessels that are repeat offenders in these illicit trade networks.
And what exactly led to this becoming a kinetic engagement, a pursuit?
Well, the U.S. cited specific details. They said the vessel refused repeated demands by U.S. forces to allow them to board for an inspection.
And after that refusal?
The vessel fled. That necessitated the deployment of military assets and the active pursuit that we're now tracking. In the eyes of the U.S. government, that refusal to comply basically confirms their suspicions.
And we have to emphasize, this is not an isolated incident. This is part of a pattern.
A very clear pattern. If this pursuit is successful, it will be the third major seizure in just a couple of weeks. It follows the interception of two other tankers, the Skipper and the Sentries. Both were taken since December 10th.
That frequency is startling.
The frequency, the operational readiness, it all demonstrates a clear, sustained, and very aggressive shift in U.S. maritime policy in the region.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's transition from the specific tactics of the pursuit to the overarching strategy here.
Yeah.
If the U.S. is willing to deploy this kind of kinetic force, this isn't some arbitrary policing action.
No, not at all.
So what is the broader U.S. pressure campaign that's driving this escalation against Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro?
This strategy is explicitly attributed to the administration of President Trump. The focus is to, well, relentlessly intensify pressure on Caracas. The economic sanctions were already severe.
But this is something new.
This is different. This shift involves reinforcing those economic measures with a massive, deliberate change in the regional military posture.
And just how significant is that increase in U.S. military presence in this really crucial maritime area?
It's substantial. And it's been growing all year. The sources detail a consistent increase, initially tied to broader anti-drug smuggling operations.
Right, I remember those reports.
We know dozens of interdictions against suspected drug smuggling vessels have happened since September, and that provided a sort of framework of heightened military scrutiny that's now being repurposed for sanctions enforcement.
But the most significant detail here, the real hardware on the board, has to be the deployment of the USS Gerald Ford.
That is the critical point.
This is not just a few patrol boats. This is the definition of global power projection.
It is. We have to talk about the significance of the USS Gerald Ford carrier strike group. This is not routine. The Ford is the newest, most capable aircraft carrier in the world.
It represents sustained power projection, air superiority.
And rapid response capability. Its current location, about 600 kilometers southwest of Puerto Rico, places this formidable naval asset. Well, alarmingly close to Venezuela.
And the significance for the listener here is that a carrier strike group like that is designed to operate as its own sovereign unit. It can conduct major combat operations far from home.
And deploying it for sanctions enforcement?
It fundamentally changes the nature of the pressure being applied.
It absolutely does. It sends a message that the U.S. is not only committed to this, but has the ability to rapidly and credibly apply military force if challenged. It transforms economic pressure into a tangible, proximate threat.
And the rhetoric coming out of Washington has been just as aggressive as the physical deployment.
The high-level rhetoric really underscores the intent. We have President Trump's explicit directive calling for a total blockade.
A total blockade on all sanctioned oil tankers moving in or out of Venezuela.
A clear statement of intent to completely choke off Venezuela's main economic lifeline.
But the rhetoric escalates even further. There was a specific claim made about ownership that goes way beyond mere enforcement. It challenges national sovereignty itself.
That is probably the single most provocative detail in our source material. The statement came from Deputy White House Chief of Staff Stephen Miller.
What did he say?
He explicitly claimed that Venezuelan oil belongs to the U.S.
Belongs to the U.S.
Yes. And this detail raises an incredibly important question about the limits of sanctions. When an administration claims ownership of another sovereign nation's vital resources, it moves far beyond just trade restrictions. It suggests a potential justification for resource seizure, not just interdiction.
That assertion completely changes the legal goalposts. So if Washington is defining this as law enforcement, how is the rest of the world, particularly nations supporting Caracas, defining this aggressive shift?
This is where it gets really interesting, contrasting the justifications.
Right.
Venezuela's reaction is, as you'd predict, intense and absolute. They're categorizing the U.S. actions not as enforcement, but as piracy.
Piracy.
And they're issuing stern warnings that seizing these tankers constitutes economic warfare. They see this as an existential threat intended to undermine their national survival.
And what, according to Caracas, is Washington's ultimate goal with all this?
Venezuela is explicit in its accusation. They say Washington is trying to suffocate the country's oil-dependent economy to achieve regime change and, critically, to gain direct control of Venezuela's huge oil reserves. The largest in the world. The largest verified reserves in the world. They argue this isn't about democracy, it's about resource capture, just executed under the guise of sanctions.
That accusation immediately broadens our view far beyond the Caribbean. How is the wider international community reacting to the presence of the USS Ford and this kind of military power being used in international waters?
The U.S. actions have drawn sharp, unified warnings from major global powers. Russia and China, in a rare joint statement, specifically warned that this whole escalation risks profound regional instability.
And they're calling for restraint.
Their collective demand is for all parties to immediately exercise restraint and respect international law, freedom of navigation, sovereignty, all of it.
The concern, fundamentally, must be about precedent, right? If the U.S. can deploy a carrier group and seize vessels based purely on its own domestic sanctions.
What does that mean for global commerce, for any sanctioned nation?
Exactly.
That is precisely the core objection from Moscow and Beijing. They see this as a dangerous erosion of the post-World War II international legal structure. If the U.S. can militarize its domestic sanctions, it implies international waters are no longer free from the kinetic application of national economic policy.
A terrible precedent for their own shipping interests globally.
A terrible precedent, and Russia, in particular, issued a very specific, very pointed public warning. They used exceptionally strong language.
Role is the language.
They issued a separate public caution to the U.S. to avoid making a fatal mistake regarding Venezuela.
A fatal mistake. That phrasing is designed to convey severe risk.
It is. It suggests that if U.S. actions result in casualties, or if these seizure operations go wrong and lead to the destruction of sovereign assets, the consequences could be immediate, severe, and, potentially lead to highly destabilizing counteractions elsewhere in the world.
Wow. So this entire situation is a complex collision where economic policy is colliding violently with military enforcement and claims of sovereignty.
And it's all playing out in a critical strategic waterway. It shows how easily an economic disagreement can become a naval crisis. It is the ultimate pressure test of how far a nation can stretch the definition of enforcement before it becomes an act of war.
Absolutely. So let's synthesize the core conflict points we've covered. We're seeing a U.S. policy of highly aggressive maritime enforcement.
Using, legally dubious claims like fake flags.
And backing those claims with unprecedented military assets, specifically the Gerald Ford carrier strike group. This is countered by Venezuela's immediate and forceful claims of piracy and economic warfare.
Which is in turn backed by serious warnings about regional stability from major powers like Russia and China.
It just shows this incredibly complex intersection of economic pressure, overwhelming military capability, and highly contested international law playing out in real time.
The key takeaway, I think, is that the rules of engagement for economic sanctions are fundamentally changing. This is no longer just an office in the Treasury Department blocking bank transfers.
No, it's active naval intervention.
And the definition of what constitutes legitimate enforcement versus militarized coercion is blurring, and blurring rapidly.
Exactly. So, what does this all mean for the future? Given the U.S. justification of seizing vessels flying fake flags and the global nature of the shipping industry, we leave you with this final provocative thought.
How might these incidents permanently redefine the interpretation and enforcement of international sanctions on the high seas, particularly when they involve resources like oil that are vital to a nation's very survival? Will deploying military assets for economic enforcement just become the new normal?
Further weakening the global framework of sovereignty and free passage. A truly unsettling question for the stability of global trade. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.